Okay, we're going. Guys, welcome to Hybrid Calisthenics Podcast. This is Hampton, your brother Hampton, and I'm with Strongman Storytelling, a performing strongman, among many other things, Tim Fox. Tim, how are you doing? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Hampton. I'm really excited to be here. Really looking forward to it. I'm doing great.
So I'm going to ask you some questions that I may know the answer to, but I feel like the general public may not. What is a strongman, and how does that differentiate from being a bodybuilder, power lifter, so on and so forth?
Well, definitely. I'm a performing strongman and more of an old-time strongman. I was trained by Dennis Rogers from Houston, Texas, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. About 2007, I bought all of Dennis Rogers' DVDs, and I have them actually here with me, so you can kind of get a look here. Here's odd object bending and breaking. So he's talking about bending wrenches, frying pans, horseshoes, that kind of thing. Here is driving a nail through a board with your hand with no hammer. So you use your hand. You actually put the nail in your palm with a small rag, and the nail sticking out here, and you do an overhand blow and drive it through a board with one blow. A grip that rips. And this is, of course, phone book tearing. And he has a DVD here on scrolling, and that's Eric Vining on the front there. And Eric is really the best steel scroller in the world, and that is bending steel bars into various shapes, artistic shapes. And really, old-time strongman is a performing art, and it's also a performance art. So it's getting up in front of a crowd, giving them an inspirational message, and putting together a series of feats of strength that will blow their mind. But you use the feats of strength to get their attention, and then you hit them with a great message. So you want to give them something that's going to inspire them to either, work on a stronghold, an addiction that's bothering them. You could help them improve their life. You could help them, any message, but it's a positive message that you're going to deliver through feats of strength. So I've also done competitive strongman, of course, and that's what you would see on TV, log press, tire flip, that kind of thing. And I really love that. But old time strongman is totally different. And you don't have to be big. You do not have to be big. Now, I'm a pretty good size guy. I'm 6 foot. I weigh about 290 pounds. But really, I'm the exception because my instructor, Dennis Rogers, he was about 5'8", 168 pounds, and he can bend wrenches that I cannot bend. He can tear a phone that I cannot tear. He can take a phone book, wrap it in duct tape, and tear it. And he can tear cards behind his back. He can take a deck of cards, put on handcuffs, wrap it in duct tape, tear it behind his back. He will blow your mind. He can actually take a wrench and not only bend it into a U, but he can bend it into an S. So you actually bend it in two directions. And he's 5'8", 168 pounds. So I read about Dennis originally in Milo, which is a journal for serious strength athletes put out by Randall Strawson. So I'm 40 years old. I started reading that when I was about 20 years old, probably 20 years ago. And I read a book called Dinosaur Training by Brooks Kubik. And I love that book. That is my favorite training book of all time, Dinosaur Training. And it talks about old-time strongmen and the way they train. So a lot of thick bar work, a lot of sandbag training, a lot of lifting barrels and odd objects, farmer's walk, 20 rep squats, 20 rep deadlifts, things that are really, really hard, a lot of thick-handled dumbbells that are really big, and just the basics. But through Dinosaur Training, started reading Milo. I saw an article on Dennis Rogers, and where he performed in Houston, Texas. I bought the Milo, of course, and still have it. And then in 2007, I saw that Dennis was selling his DVDs. So I thought, man, I need to buy all these DVDs at one time. So in July, I bought all of Dennis's DVDs at one time. And then just a couple months later, in September of 2007, I saw that Dennis was doing a coaching program over the internet. And it was called Superhuman Coaching at Old Time Strongman University. It was 2 parts. So the Superhuman Coaching, it was more, Christian based. You would have a Bible study. And, it would talk about being a better person. And then the Old Time Strongman University, you would get a DVD on horseshoe bending or dropping a bowling ball on your stomach off of a ladder. You get somebody to get up on the ladder with a bowling ball, and you lay down with a ceramic plate on your stomach, and they drop the ball on your stomach. So there would be an instructional DVD on a particular feat of strength like that you could do to wow a crowd. So I was a member of that for about a year. And then we had our first ever meeting in Houston, Texas. And it was actually August 8th of 2008. So it was 08, 08, 08. So we all met in Houston, Texas. And I met some of the best performing strongmen around. Pat Povolitis, who actually routinely sticks his hand in a cougar trap and lets the cougar trap shut on his hand. And his fingers, the bones in his fingers are so well developed through Wolff's Law of bending short steel that he can stick his hand in a cougar trap. And beyond that, you've got Dennis doing the S wrench. Chris Ryder was there, and he's Hercules. And you can see him on TikTok and Instagram at Hercules. And he actually uses his hair and attaches it to a chain and breaks jack chain with his hair, and also bends a wrench using his hair in a platform. So, I mean, it was things that just blew my mind. And of course, Iron Tamer Dave Whitley is also a student of Dennis Rogers, and he actually has taken over Old Time Strongman University, and he is now the president. Dennis gave him that, I believe, late last year. He moved the business over to Dave Whitley. So Iron Tamer Dave Whitley. And Dave might be out there watching this, and if not now, he may watch it later. But Dave has been really instrumental in my development as a strongman. The first 2 feats that I learned were driving a nail through a board. And I had a mental block on that one because Dennis actually, in one of these DVDs, he has a video where the nail actually goes up into his hand, and he had backward, and he has to go to the emergency room. But the reason he did it is he was using kind of a bar stool, and the bar stool was bouncy, and he was kind of in a rush, and he's on tape doing it, and the rebound effect got him. And he had done it a million times, but it was that one time that got him. So everybody who learned, really, a lot of people learned through Dennis. So I started doing it in the backyard, and I got about halfway through the board, and I thought, man, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not all the whole way. And Dennis actually had something in the DVD where he says, put the nail in, and then just use your other hand to push through, just so you know that it can go through. So just that little breakthrough of knowing that when you put your other hand on it and push down, that you're going to make it through the board. You put a balloon under the board, and that motivates you to pop the balloon. So I immediately popped the balloon, and I was okay. So that was the first. Horseshoe bending and nail driving were the first 2 feats that I learned. And ironically, years later, Dennis said in another seminar, he said, if you know how to bend a horseshoe and drive a nail through a board, they're going to think you're Superman. And I thought, wow, these are my first 2 that I learned. And I was a school resource officer at the time. I'm a sheriff's deputy, and I'm on the road now in the warrants division. But during the time, I was at a high school. So I was at the school. I showed that to a couple kids, and it blew their mind. They weren't ready for me to bend a horseshoe and drive a nail through a board. So Dennis was absolutely correct. You know, you get about maybe 6 feats you can do. You can do an Old Time Strongman show. And Hampton, I'm telling that to you too, because you can do calisthenics in the Old Time Strongman show. There's another man that I met in Houston, Texas, named Logan Christopher, and he's really big into calisthenics.
I know
and
of him.
Do you know Logan?
I know of him, yes.
He would get into a wrestler's bridge on his head, and he would actually support someone on his hips. So they would stand on his hips, and he would be in a wrestler's bridge, and he bent a nail while in the bridge. So he bent a 60 penny nail in a wrestler's bridge doing a support lift with somebody on top of him. So, you know, Logan blew my mind. And he is another example that you do not have to be big to do this stuff, because Logan was not really a huge guy. You know, I'm not sure exactly how tall Logan is, but I mean, you know, he's pretty good height, and he's muscular, but not humongous. And he was ripping phone books, tearing cards, bending horseshoes, bending nails, dropping into a wrestler's bridge, supporting people. And everyone can have a different show, Hampton. If you wanted to be an all-time strongman, you could have a show with your message with calisthenics, and then do about 3 or 4 other feats. And you would have something that you could take to a boys and girls club. And I'm not just saying to Hampton, I'm saying to all the listeners out there, you can learn this stuff. It's learnable. Anything in the world is learnable. So, you know, I learned originally through these DVDs, and then I went and met Dennis in person. And of course, I've worked with Iron Tamer. I've worked with Hercules Chris Ryder in the past. and they've both helped me refine my skills. But everything is learnable. And if you saw me when I started lifting weights, you would say it's not for him, because I was super skinny. I was a very skinny kid. And I always wanted to lift weights. And I was a big fan of pro wrestling. And I love pro wrestling. I love playing with He-Man action figures. And if you looked at the He-Man action figures, He-Man, Skeletor, and all the other ones, they were all jacked. They all had a big chest. They had big shoulders. They had big triceps, and they had veins sticking out of their arms. And I wanted to be He-Man when I was a kid. So, but I was a very picky eater. I did not like vegetables. And I started lifting weights. I was 12 years old when I started lifting weights. And I know we're probably getting into another question, and I'm sitting here talking.
No problem. No problem. Keep going.
So I started working out. I was very skinny, but every time we would do PE, I would do very well when we did like the president's test, you know? So I could always do a lot of reps of push-ups. I could always do a lot of chin-ups, and really more chin-ups than most people. You know, I could do 20 chin-ups even back then. So I was strong, but I was skinny. So I've originally started working out in my basement. And to tell you what a dork I was, okay, and there's no shame in admitting, hey, I'm a dork, I'm a nerd. But actually, a nerd would make good grades. I didn't make good grades, so I would be more of a dork. So listen, my mom counted my reps in the basement when I lifted weights. I had dumbbells, I had a bench press, and I had a rowing machine. And she would count my reps, and I'm Tim now, but she would call me Timbo. And she would be clapping for me. She was like, come on, Timbo, you can do it. You can do it. And I was 12 years old, and I'd be doing reps, you know, with the curl. And I had Pumping Iron. I had that on VHS. So I watched Pumping Iron a million times. I wore the tape out. And my mom, I'd be doing curls, and my mom would say, come on, Timbo, you can do it. So I always had that encouraging voice from my mother. And even though I was skinny, I finally joined a gym, and it was called the Training Barn in Shelbyville, Tennessee. I live in Middle Tennessee, and didn't really know what I was doing. And I got with an older lifter, and he said, hey, weightlifting is great, but you're going to have to learn how to eat. So then I started eating steak and eggs and those kind of things, and trying to gain weight, and never had a problem gaining weight after that. That's not for everybody. You know, it's great to be lean also. So, you know, I'm not trying to tell you to anybody that, hey, you have to gain weight to be successful in physical culture, because my own mentor, Dennis Rogers, shows that you do not have to be a mass monster to do any of this amazing stuff. So just be yourself in life, go after your own goals, and whatever your goals are in physical culture, just find a mentor, find somebody to emulate, and then just do what they do. And, you know, I'm not saying copy or fake it till you make it, but definitely use people as an inspiration, and then just go from there and try to meet the people in real life if you can. If you get the opportunity to meet them in real life, always take that opportunity. I flew to Houston, Texas to meet Dennis, and honestly, it was the best move I ever made. So it was long.
Great stuff. Yeah. No, that was I actually like it, and that's why I stay silent. And I if people can't see it, I reacted with nodding and waving and thumbs up, because I like to give people a chance to speak everything they want. So don't worry about being long-winded. It's fine. I will say I got a message from Brendo, and hello, some people that are joining, but you brought up a lot of things, and there was a lot of follow-up questions to that. But I still think the most important is that you brought up that how old-time strongmanship is differentiated is you got people's attention with feats of strength, and then you delivered a message. What is your message?
My message, basically, it's a very basic message, and really this is everyone's message, and it's not a cop-out. My message is overcoming. My whole show is based on overcoming. It could be overcoming an obstacle in your life. I speak at rehab facilities to people who are alcoholics and drug addicts, and a stronghold would be alcohol. You know, the stronghold in their life that's holding them back would be alcohol or drugs. So I speak to those people, and I speak about overcoming that. You know, I'm a Christian. I speak in churches, and I talk about
me too.
Yes, I talk about overcoming and giving all the glory to God. So when I do a church show, and which I love doing church shows, I also do school assemblies. You know, and I've had people tell me, even they say, "Man, Tim, you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to do school assemblies for anti-bullying, or you're just going to have to do church shows. You can't do them both." but honestly, you can. So it's there's a separation of church and state, but at the same time, I can definitely do strongman shows in churches and give all the glory to God. And throughout the week, I can do anti-bullying shows in schools, and I love it. So I'm not going to stop doing one or the other. I'm going to continue to do both.
What was the reasoning for saying that you could only do one?
Some people that, it's a business strategy. I've had people, in business, they say, you need to kind of get the laser focus. But to me, that's putting the blinders on, they say, focus on one thing. So, but I'm sorry, that's not me. It's like, I've really enjoyed TikTok here lately, and I've had some early success on TikTok, and it's a lot of fun, but I don't just focus on one thing. And I'm trying to grow my Instagram because it's not as big as my TikTok, but it's really that advice that I've gotten has been more business advice. They're saying, go all in on one thing, go all in on the school assemblies. However, I'm sorry, I'm not going to walk away from God. I'm going to give God the glory, and I'm still going to do my church shows, and I love them,
Right.
So.
Well, that's almost touching into entrepreneurship, which is something that I talk about, where your focus is. And I think you can have macro focus, like on a large scale, you're focused on spreading this message and being a strong man. And on the micro scale, then you can diversify, because you never know what's going to stick. Okay,
Yes.
before I did TikTok, my biggest audience was Facebook. So if you throw all these things at the wall and something sticks, then you can pursue that. Whereas if you only focus on one thing, when it fails, then it's failed, and you don't know where to go from there. So that's just my thought on that.
I agree. And I'm not really an either or kind of guy. I'm both and, I'm a both and kind of guy. So,
Absolutely. Oh, and just to touch upon that last point, just this is a good point to bring it up. One of the YouTube audience asked, what type of food should I eat, when, and how many calories should I eat? And he also asked any tips to help me get the abs and relieve back pain. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yes. And it's a, general answers. However, for back pain, and Hampton, I know you're an expert on this, and you actually recommended on my TikTok, somebody asked about back pain, and I believe you recommended bridging, which is excellent. I've also been involved in powerlifting. I've been a competitive powerlifter in the past. I really believe in the reverse hyper machine, and I also believe in the regular hyperextension and the 45-degree hyperextension for the lower back. So that's one thing. However, the calorie questions, those kind of questions are really, here's the answer for everything about those kind of questions. It depends on your goal. So whoever is asking that question about whether it's gaining weight, it depends on your goal. So, if you want to gain weight, I would suggest anywhere from 16 to 18 calories per pound of body weight. And that's a lot. That's a lot of calories. However, you will gain weight by eating 16 to 18 calories per pound of body weight. But of course, don't eat junk food. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not a bodybuilder, even though I love bodybuilding. I've done a lot of bodybuilding exercises. But when I started lifting weights, I weighed 147, and now I weigh about 290 plus. I actually need to lose weight right now. So I almost feel bad for even answering this question, because I need to lose about 20 or 30 pounds of fat. However, eat real food. So the best advice I can give you is the same advice that was in the book Dinosaur Training that I was talking about earlier. Eat real food. Eat, steak, eggs, potatoes, sweet potatoes, vegetables, real solid food, real sustenance, oatmeal, things that your body has to work to digest. You will gain weight by eating, sustenance, real food that your body digests, real protein. Now, when you answer these kind of questions, you're going to have people who are also vegan. So it's like, I can't tell, someone who's vegan to eat steak and eggs, so if you're looking for protein, and it depends on how you feel about dairy. If somebody is lactose intolerant, I wouldn't suggest that they eat Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. However, if you can handle milk very well, non-fat Greek yogurt is one of the best things you can eat, I believe. Look at the carbs and make sure the carbs aren't higher than the protein. But they have probiotics that are good for your stomach. One of my treats, that if somebody is on some type of diet and they have a sweet tooth, usually if your sweet tooth is an itching for vitamin C, you want vitamin C. So I would say get some frozen blueberries and eat some frozen blueberries. They're loaded in vitamin C, and you get that texture of coldness. So you almost feel like you have a treat. And the same thing with, the Greek yogurt. You can take non-fat Greek yogurt and you can put a little bit of granola on it and then pour some natural honey. And it feels like something from Dairy Queen, believe it or not. I know that sounds like hyperbole to say it's from Dairy Queen. However, if you're on a diet, that's the closest thing to a dessert that you could get, is having Greek yogurt with some honey and berries, and your body actually craves that. Or if you have a sweet tooth, eat some oranges, eat 2 oranges and tell me that you still have the sweet tooth, because the orange is going to satisfy your vitamin C deficiency, and it's going to satisfy what your body really wants. So when your body has an itching for a sweet tooth, it's asking for vitamin C. It's asking for blueberries and oranges.
No, I like that a lot. And how you mentioned that if you have a sweet tooth and you feel like you need to eat something sweet, you can get that from fruit. And
Yes.
I think if anyone wants to try that, even for a couple of weeks, they may notice their craving for like a drink from Sonic goes down a little bit, because as we absorb less processed sugar, we become less addicted to it. And I mean, there's a whole debate about how addictive sugar is, but I believe it is not controversial to say it is addictive. So when we get high amounts of processed sugar, not only is it bad for us, but we want it all the time. And if you scale back to eating fruit, they will taste very sweet to you. If you're used to eating pure sugar, eating an orange, you might be like, well, this tastes like water. But after you get used to it, it's definitely very sweet.
Definitely.
And just to get a lightning round of a couple of questions, someone asked, were you in an overweight state or were you skinny when you started working out? I believe you said you were skinny, correct?
Yeah. I was pretty skinny as a kid. And actually, if you follow me on TikTok at Strongman Storytelling, pretty soon I'm going to post a video. I was in a country music video at the end of my road when I was a kid here in Tennessee.
Wow.
And I wear contacts now. Okay. So I wore glasses then. And I would look like a kid that would be bullied. So you would think, okay, you do strongman shows and you do anti-bullying shows. Were you bullied? Honestly, I really wasn't bullied. I have a bullying story, but it didn't happen at my school, and I'll tell kids that it's a rural school that I grew up in, and really the bullying wasn't bad. But if you saw me in this country music video, you would think that I was the kid that got bullied, because I'm wearing an Alf t-shirt. So for the people who don't know what Alf is, it is a sitcom from the 80s with this alien that is furry. So I have this furry alien on my chest, and I have my glasses, and I am literally skin and bones here. Okay. I'm very skinny, and I'm doing this funky dance, and I'll put it on my TikTok in the next couple of days so you can see it. Strongman Storytelling. And that is what I looked like as a kid, as far as being skinny. So I had He-Man action figures that I was playing with during that time. So when you see the little boy in the country music video, I was playing with He-Man. I had pro wrestling action figures, and I had posters on my wall of pro wrestlers. And I was a very skinny kid. Like I said, I was a picky eater. However, that changed later as I got more into heavy weightlifting, and I realized that I had to eat protein. I had a mentor, John Wildish, who told me, you have to eat protein. So, he suggested I eat a can of tuna with a baked potato before I'd go to bed. And I hated tuna. I didn't like it, but I would make myself eat it anyway. And then I'd find a way to eat it. I'd put mustard on it, so it's like, cottage cheese is another example that I was going to mention. The Greek yogurt tastes great, but some cottage cheese has an aftertaste. However, cottage cheese is loaded with protein, and it is loaded with glutamine. So cottage cheese is one of the best things you can eat. But even my own sons, and I'm 40 years old, and my daughter is grown, and she actually has babies. I'm a grandfather, but even my own kids will not eat cottage cheese because they saw daddy eat it for a long time, and they would be like, ooh, and they would cover the nose. I can't eat cottage cheese, Dad. There's no way that I can eat cottage cheese. But cottage cheese is one of the best things that you can eat if you're not lactose intolerant. Same thing with Greek yogurt. But I kind of went off on a tangent there. But
No, that's great. I love it. Don't apologize. I like it a lot. Thank you for answering. A couple of things I will mention, because I almost forgot. You mentioned if someone were vegan, they have to look for alternative sources of protein. There are others, but off the top of my head, nuts are very good. Beans work. And avocados aren't necessarily protein rich, but they have protein, and they're one of my favorite fruits to eat. They're a fruit.
Yes, I love avocados. And who was asking about weight gain, that is a great healthy fat to eat to gain weight. So
Right. And he clarified this on how to get abs. So if you work your core, and I'm sure he knows a lot about this. If you work your core and then you diet off, that's the best way to get. You work up the core and you build the muscle in your abs, and then you diet off to reveal the definition.
definitely. Now, see me, I'm a long way from having abs right now because I'm 6'2", 290. However, I can show you pictures on even I think they're even on my TikTok where I did have abs when I was younger. And really, the abs come from two things, and it's to me, it's not ab exercises. Abs come from a really this is a bad word that I don't even like this word. Okay, caloric deficit. I hate that word. You got to have a calorie deficit. You know, the caloric deficit is the scary word because I'm like, oh man, you know, I'm talking about all this food that is so great. And when I talk about gaining weight, you can eat pizza, you can eat the eggs and steak. But when you talk about caloric deficit, that means, okay, I'm going to have to limit myself on what I'm eating. And I'm still going to have to eat a high protein diet and drink a lot of water. So you have to drink a lot of water. You have to eat a high protein diet, but you still have to be in a caloric deficit. And then the other thing, so caloric deficit is one. Number two is sprinting. So to me, Body for Life, which was a book by Bill Phillips, and I was going to get into that also. You know, I got into muscle magazines about the same time. I was into pro wrestling, and a funny story, kind of off topic, but I had chicken pox when I was a kid. And my mom was going to go to the grocery store, and she said, do you want one of your wrestling magazines? You got chicken pox, you're sick. And I said, you know what? I said, get me two magazines, Flex Magazine and Iron Man Magazine. So she brought me Flex Magazine, and I believe it had a bodybuilder named Paul DeMeo on the cover, and Iron Man Magazine with Mike O'Hearn on the cover. And Mike O'Hearn is on TikTok also. Now he's amazing, and he's one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. So I started reading muscle magazines. However, I began to realize that, you know, a lot of the advice wasn't that great. You know, it would be by people who were enhanced by steroids and other drugs. You know, I hate to just blast them, but I'm just being honest. So I started reading a magazine called Muscle Media 2000. So it was put out by Bill Phillips, and this was about 1995. And there was a Canadian strength coach in that magazine who had a article called Question of Strength. And his name is Charles Poliquin. Now, I mispronounced his name for years and called him Poliquin because I just read all this stuff. I bought his books. I have his books in my bookshelf behind me. He passed away a couple years ago, maybe last year or the year before. And ironically, Sean Stevenson, who was a mentor to me, passed away last year also. And I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and 2 years ago at one of Sean's public speaking seminars. And Sean is a great public speaker. But I had read Charles Poliquin for so long in Muscle Media. I began like in 1995, and I've read most of everything he's ever written. I wanted to meet him, and he lived in Phoenix, and I went to where his business was supposed to be, but it had already moved. So I didn't get to meet Charles Poliquin. However, I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm going off on a tangent, but back to Muscle Media 2000. Bill Phillips wrote a book called Body for Life. And the best thing you can do to get abs is to run sprints, to do sprint intervals 3 times a week. So all the ab exercises in the world are great, but if you have a layer of fat covering them like I do, okay, I currently have a layer of fat covering my abs. And really, this is a great podcast because I'm giving you guys information that I need to tell myself. So sprint 3 times a week for 20 minutes. That's it. 20 minutes. Get about 40 or 50 yards and do sprints. You know, your heart rate doesn't even have to get high. It's not even about your heart rate being high. It's about repeatedly doing the sprints. So you do the sprints and you have a caloric deficit, and that's how you get abs.
Yeah, I love sprints, and if you can find a hill, a steep one, you do hill sprints. Those can be very intense. Make sure your body is conditioned because some people, first time they're trying it, they don't expect it's going to hit them so hard until they're up to the hill, or they do it another time and they throw up. So make sure you're conditioned for it. But they're very hard, and you're absolutely right. It's a great way to get abs.
And that's
one of the way. Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, sprinting is weightlifting. That's all there is
Lifting
to
your
it.
own weight. Yeah.
Sprinting is resistance training. So if you think, I used to think that cardio would take me away from my goals, which is very limited thinking. It's not good at all. So any kind of cardio, I would think, oh man, I was so small when I was a kid. I thought, what if I lose all my muscle? Well, that's ridiculous. And there's another old time strongman that's on TikTok named Bud Jeffries. And he is also one of my inspirations. And he is a big guy who can do amazing things. I mean, he did a bottom squat of 1,000 pounds, you know, in the power rack.
Wow.
He is really, truly the modern day. He's been called the modern day Paul Anderson, you know, and he really is. And I was actually lucky enough last year to perform at Paul Anderson's youth home in Vidalia, Georgia, for his youth that lived there on the youth home. And I actually did a strongman show last October at Paul's graveside. So I did a strongman show right beside Paul Anderson's grave last year at Founders Day. And I'm actually going to suggest to them that they get Bud next time, because I want Bud to be there, because he truly is the modern day Paul Anderson. He can drop into a full splits. I mean, Bud is just unreal. So follow Bud Jeffries on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And you know, I've got a lot of DVDs and books from Bud Jeffries from back in the day, and he's also a student of Dennis Rogers.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
One thing I'll tack on to the thing about abs before we move on, because we have lots of great questions. Thank you for your questions, guys. Is something that I found, and this is controversial, but this is just my experience with it, is intermittent fasting worked well for me. Now, some people have trouble with not eating for 15, 16 hours. For me, it was natural. For me, I was like, oh, what I've been doing my entire life is intermittent fasting, because I'm kind of a workaholic, so much so that I have to kind of police myself, where if I really get into something that I'm interested in, I'll forget to eat until like 6 p.m. at night. And there was a while when I was pushing this, and I'm already pretty lean, and it's hard to get, as you get leaner and leaner, it's hard to lose more and more fat. And I noticed that I was getting leaner. I was losing fat while putting on some weight, actually. So intermittent fasting, something you can experiment with, especially if you want abs. Again, it doesn't work for everyone. Some people dislike it. But for me, even something like a 16-8 split worked very well for me. You guys can do your own research on that.
Yes. That's great.
One of our questions that I talked with Tim before the podcast, and we both liked, was this person asked, do you have any tips on dealing with self-hatred?
Yes. And I briefly mentioned Sean Stevenson, and he is really my favorite speaker of all time. So in the world of old time strongman, I mentioned you have the strongman feats to get their attention, but once you have their attention, you have to give them some content. So that's where Sean Stevenson stepped in. And Sean, you can look him up on YouTube. And I don't know if you do a show notes, but even if you don't do show notes, whoever's watching this, just look up The Prison of Your Mind by Sean Stevenson. And it is a TED Talk that he did at a prison. Now, Sean had a disease, and I don't want to mispronounce the name of it, but I think it's octogenesis imperfecta. I know I just mispronounced that. However, he was very small. He was wheelchair bound, and his bones were very, very brittle, and they would break very easily. So he broke bones many, many times throughout his childhood. And he was such a unique individual, but he was really the best speaker I've ever heard, because Sean could make you laugh, Sean could make you cry, and he could make you rethink your life. So if he gets on a stage, he could lower the lights and take you into a sad story and have the whole audience crying. But by the end, he would bring the lights up and bring everybody back up, and it was like you were on an emotional roller coaster. But study Sean Stevenson and look him up on YouTube. Watch anything that he's in as far as public speaking, and his life goal. You know, a lot of people don't know what their life goal is, and it's a very deep question to say, hey, what's your life goal? You know, a lot of people never even ask you that. But Sean could sit back and be confident and hold his shoulders back, and he could look you right in the eye, and he could tell you his life goal and his life's ambition, his life goal, his purpose was to rid the world of insecurity. And he had the cure for insecurity. And what it is, and it's self-care. we have to become our own best friend, and we have to be kind to ourselves, and we have to love ourselves. We have to make loving choices for ourselves. We have a brain up here, and I know that it sounds crazy to say that. Of course we do. So we have a brain up here that's giving us thoughts all the time. Well, some of those thoughts are not positive, and some of them are toxic, and they could be based on things that happened to us in our childhood. It could just be a self-limiting belief, just believing, if I believe that I could never be a strong man, that I could never lift heavy weights, that I could never become a police officer. If I had those beliefs, I wouldn't have the courage to go after it. So we have to be kind to ourselves. We have to be kind to our own brain. We have to, if a toxic thought pops up, and I'm getting better at it as I'm older. However, I have a long way to go. I have a long way to go in this. So we think of a toxic thought, you have to eliminate that. You have to eliminate the toxic thought and move on. And it's great if you can realize where the toxic thought came from. But even if you can't realize where the toxic thought came from, you have to drop it off. You have to make it history. You have to make it part of your past and move forward. You have to believe in yourself. And, it's great to have a great network of people. And I have a great network of people. Like I mentioned, Dave Whitley, he's another performing strongman, and he's helped me in so many ways. You have to have a network of friends and family that care for you. But ultimately, we have to care for ourselves, and we have to rid our own brain of insecurity. And it's easier said than done. However, you do have to realize when those toxic thoughts come that they're not real, that there's something that we believe about ourselves that is not true, and you have to move on. So, it's a very basic answer, and it sounds easier said than done. Some people would scoff at it, but you have to take care of yourself. So I love to sit in a hot tub. There's nothing better to me than sitting in a hot tub. So if I want to have a great night, I would eat a steak and eat a great meal, and then go sit in a hot tub and relax and meditate and think about my goals. And I would specifically think about, where do I want to do a strongman show? I'd think, who do I want to talk to? I do a lot with boys and girls clubs. I would say, where's the boys and girls club? I haven't been yet. And then I'd call them up and talk to them and tell them what I do briefly and say, I'd love to come to your boys and girls club. It's like fishing, the business is not going to come to you. You have to go to it. I have to, prospect is what you would call it. So, I'll sit in a hot tub and relax and think about places that I'd like to go. I thought of Paul Anderson's youth home. I thought, man, it would be wonderful if I could perform at Paul Anderson's youth home, and I'd be relaxed, sitting in a hot tub, sitting in a warm bath. And then the next thing you know, I contacted Paul Anderson's youth home, and the next thing you know, I was there. It was a 6-hour drive, and I created that with my mind. And a lot of people call that the secret, but I mean, really, it's okay. I mean, I like the secret, but at the same time, I'm not saying you can will everything into existence, but at the same time, your brain is the coming attractions. Your thoughts are the coming attractions for tomorrow. So take care of your brain, think about your goals, and then come up with a plan to talk to those people that you want to talk to get on that particular stage. And I know that's more for someone who's a speaker, but just to rid yourself of insecurity, think positive thoughts, whatever you have to do to get yourself out of that state, whether it's eat a good meal, spend time with a loved one, go for a walk, read, listen to a podcast, whatever you have to do to reset your brain, just reset your brain. Listen to music, listen to some positive music. If you're depressed, drink some coffee to get some caffeine. If you're okay with drinking caffeine, and drink some coffee and listen to some upbeat, positive music, maybe music that's kind of silly. Like I like 80s pop that is very corny, very like one-hit wonders. So it's like, if I was feeling depressed, I'd probably drink 3 or 4 cups of coffee and listen to 80s pop. And then the next thing you know, I'm probably going to smile. You know what I mean? So there's tricks we can play on our own brain to get some dopamine and get out of a bad mood, and of course, depression is real. The mental illness is out there. My own mother is still alive, and she is mentally ill. And when I was a boy, of course, she was schizophrenic and had bipolar disorder. And I always say this, and I don't, it sounds like I'm scoffing at it, but I'll say my mom was bipolar when bipolar wasn't cool, because a lot of people say they're bipolar, but they're really not. Well, my mom was when I was a little boy. So mental illness is real. And of course, if you have thoughts of wanting to harm yourself, you need to talk to a professional. But for most people, there is something that can get us out of our funk, whether it's music, coffee, sleep. Just some days, if it's a bad day, you just got to go to sleep. Just sleep and wake up tomorrow and do it again. Try again,
Absolutely. I agree with a lot of those things. I mean, when you were talking about just having it like after a long day, for me, especially after I've worked a lot, having a steak and sitting down in a hot tub. I actually have a hot tub. I need to clean it out, but I'll use it. That sounds like a great time. And there actually are some studies behind this. And for anyone who's really into psychology, I apologize if I botch it a little bit, but I believe they said there are 3 parts of the brain. One focus on the here and now. And if you're stressed out, you can only focus on what's going on now. This is the part of your brain that's supposed to be activated when you're being chased by wolves. When you're being chased by wolves or a bear, you're not programmed to think about your taxes. Okay. So that afterwards, if you relax that part, then we can think of long-term plans. And after we relax that part, when we're fully relaxed, then we can have a creative mode. And you talk about that's when you think about when you want to do. That's a great time. A lot of my best ideas come if I'm just dried out. If I don't have ideas, I'm doing something almost inane. Like even if I'm sweeping or just relaxing or playing guitar, my best ideas come to me at that point. And I mean, that kind of bounces off the idea of stress and self-hatred, but a very important thing is the planning stage of your life, and you need to be relaxed for that. You're not slacking off. You're putting your brain in the right position to plan for your future, which is very important and very prudent, and definitely not just slacking.
Yes. And like I said, it's a very basic thing, but self-hatred, you have to love yourself in this life. You have to take 100% responsibility for your life. And you have to be your own best friend. There's no other choice in this life. You have to be your own best friend. And you can't hate yourself. You have to learn to love yourself, no matter how hard that is, no matter what you have to go through to do that. Whether you need therapy, go to therapy. Go to therapy. It can be a great thing. Whatever you have to do to learn to love yourself, because ultimately you're responsible for yourself in this life, and that's such a basic thing to say. But some people sometimes forget that, or you'll take some blows from the outside world and you'll think, man, it's just not for me. Nothing's ever fair. I never have good luck, those kind of things. And really it's limited thinking, and really it's something else that people hate to talk about. Okay. It's the most addictive drug in the world. And this is another Sean Stevenson-ism. It's called pity. When we pity ourselves. And when you first pity yourself, doesn't it feel good to pity yourself? You kind of feel sorry for yourself, and you're wanting your friends to say, oh yeah, you're right. That wasn't fair. That just wasn't fair. Pity. Well, I'm not in on the pity party. I hate pity. Pity is not for me. And I want to get back up. Fall down 8 times, get up 7. You got to keep getting up. Or actually get up 8 or 9 times. So I misspoke on that. But hell, every time you fall down, get up. No pity for yourself. So I can honestly say I'm human, and I could even have a bad day and pity myself. And I'm a police officer, so I've seen some negative things. And they can get in your brain, and it's like you have to erase it out of your brain. You can never permanently erase it, but you have to forget about it and move on. You can't pity yourself. You've got to be strong to help other people. A strong person helps themselves, but a stronger person helps other people. So I want to be the kind of person that can help other people. So I've got to be really strong. I've got to be really strong to do that, and not just physically strong. I have to be emotionally strong. So, Tony Robbins, who, a lot of people think he's very corny, but I love Tony Robbins. So I've listened to Tony Robbins for a long time, and he calls that emotional muscle. You got to have that emotional muscle. You can't have your emotions running wild. You know, somebody saying something bad about you and that upsets you, and you kill half of your day feeling bad, feeling pity, sorry for yourself. You got to have the emotional muscle to bounce back. So it's not just the physical muscle. You have to have emotional muscle. You have to have mental strength and emotional muscle. And like we talked about before we started taping, so I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, so spiritual strength is number one, and it's the most powerful. Physical strength, mental strength, spiritual strength. But you have to have emotional muscle. You can't let people rule your emotions. You can't let it happen. Especially as a police officer, you can't have it happen. But as a person, if somebody, even if you never want to be a police officer, that's great. It's like, as a person, you have to be strong. You have to be mentally strong, and you have to have emotional muscle to bounce back, you know. And hey, like another thing I've heard, you know, which is not mine, you know, I'm saying all these quotes, but you know, it's well, I actually lost my train of thought there, but what other people's opinions are you are none of your business. Other people's opinion of you is none of your business. And that's very true. Sometimes we get caught up in thinking about what other people think of me, you know, that kind of thing. It's all ego based, you know. So it's funny to hear somebody who's like, you know, an old time strongman performing strongman. You would think, well, man, he must have a giant ego. You know, he must really have a big ego to get in front of a crowd and tell us that he's super strong and do all this stuff and poke his chest out there. He probably thinks he's something else. You know, he really does. He probably thinks he's something else. But honestly, and any of my friends can tell you this, I'm very humble. I'm 40 years old, and through police work, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of death. I've seen, you know, even teenagers and children pass away early. And I've seen suicide firsthand. I've been the first responder to many suicides, unfortunately. But still, I try to remain as humble as I can be. I know I'm 40 years old, so really, my grandpa lived to be 92 and my grandma was 90. So let's just say I'm halfway through life. You know, I'm 40 years old. If I live to be 80, I'm halfway through right now. I can honestly say I'm happy with what I've done. I've become a father. I've become a grandfather. I've been in police work for 20 years, and my strongman shows have been taken off the past 3 or 4 years. And I've really enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed, you know, doing a show at Paul Anderson's youth home, at Paul Anderson's grave. And not to be morbid, but it puts you into a mind space where you're thinking, okay, time is limited here, you know, on earth. You know, time is limited. I'm 40 years old. You know, if I make it to 80, I'm halfway through. You know, I'm not done yet. I've got a lot more I want to do. You know, I want to do a lot more strongman shows. I want to encourage people. I want to be an encourager. I don't want my show to be all about me. A lot of people would think that you get up there and you bend horseshoes and you bend steel bars and you tear decks of cards and do all this stuff, and it's all about you. No, my show is about you. You know, my show is about the audience. I want the audience to leave and be inspired by me. You know, they'll probably forget my name. And every public speaker will, if they're honest, they will tell you that. They really won't remember your name, and sometimes they won't remember. They may remember strongman storytelling because that's, you know, two things that are together, and they might remember Fox because it's an odd, you know, it's an animal, you know. But for a lot of public speakers, they will not remember their name, and the public speakers are humble enough to know that. The best public speakers in the world know that the people are not going to remember their name. So when you put it into that perspective and you say, wow, this audience might not even remember my name. They might not even remember a lot of what I say, but they're probably going to remember my points, you know, my take home points. They're going to remember just a few things I say. But with old time strongman, you get an unfair advantage because they will remember your feats. They will remember you driving a board through wood with your hand. They will remember you bending a horseshoe. They're going to remember you bending a wrench, a frying pan, you know, a hammer. You know, they're going to remember that. And you have that opportunity to hit them with a quick message that can change their life, you know. And that's why old time strongman is so powerful. I love motivational speaking, but when you combine it with old time strongman, it's a 1-2 punch that really knocks people out.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. And There's a couple. We have a lot of questions, but just in case I don't get to some of them, I want to offer value to the people who are listening to me or you. Someone who is listening to that and talking about dealing with self hatred, like you mentioned, it's easier said than done. What if someone is being bullied? What would you say to them right now? We have some younger listeners. If they're
Yeah,
being bullied and they're being inundated with self-hate, maybe one or the other, maybe both at the same time, and they have
yeah,
a very constant reminder of why they should hate themselves. Maybe they have a parent telling them they're unworthy of love or anything. This happens very unfortunately, or a schoolmate or someone bullying. What would you say to someone in that situation?
definitely, definitely. Yes, you 100%. And this is the hardest thing. You have to tell someone. You have
Okay.
to tell an adult. So, I worked at a school as a school resource officer. So I was the police officer that was at a high school, and we also had an elementary school that was next door and a middle school. And I dealt with bullying very prominently. And if you were lucky enough to have a school resource officer, that is the perfect person to tell. Because when I was a kid, besides the pro wrestlers being my heroes, police officers were my heroes. So if you're lucky, not every school has an SRO. However, if you do, definitely talk to that officer. They're going to talk to the principal and come up with a plan. So, it's a problem that is too big for you to handle by yourself. And nobody ever tells you that. So, it's something that you can't fix by yourself. And when you're a little kid, you have limited thinking only because you don't have much life experience. So you get those blinders on. I did this earlier. Okay. So like you have a horse or a donkey with blinders on, they can only see what's in front of them. So when you're a little kid and you're getting bullied, all you see is that. And the problem becomes so big that you think that it can't be fixed, but it definitely can be fixed. There's people that work at that school that their job is to curtail bullying. So you talk to the principal, the vice principal, the counselor, a teacher, the SRO. You have to tell an adult, and you have to tell parent, whoever your parent is. I grew up without my biological father. So my father wasn't there, but I was raised by my grandparents and my mother. So, if your father's not there, you talk to whoever is there. I didn't have a biological father to kind of talk about that. And my grandfather was more, old school. He didn't really like to talk about feelings and things of those nature. So, it would have been hard for me. But ultimately, we all grow up and we have to take care of our own mind and our own body. So, like I tell everyone, exercise, get stronger. I'm not saying you have to be a power lifter. Do calisthenics, do yoga, take a martial art. I love jujitsu. I've competed in jujitsu, and jujitsu is great for self-defense. So but some people, maybe they don't feel like being an athlete. They don't feel like they have athletic capabilities. I wasn't into to organized sports when I was a kid. I didn't play football, baseball, basketball. I jumped on the trampoline, and eventually I lifted weights because I was watching pro wrestling and I wanted to be like a pro wrestler. But play video games, do something that is good for your brain. But you have to build up your body and you have to build up your brain. You have to understand that a bully, it's them, it's not you. It's a lack in their brain. Their brain is not fully developed, and they have most likely been bullied by someone else, most likely a parent or something of that nature, or they've seen somebody bully somebody. And it's all about power, and it's something wrong with them in their brain. So it is definitely their fault. It is not your fault, and you definitely have to talk to an adult about it. But it's a complex problem, and it's something that there's no easy answer besides, I would say, and a lot of people would say, old school. I'm not telling you to get into a fight at school, but you have to learn to become strong enough to stand up for yourself. It's not always easy. And of course, when there's multiple people, you can't fight five people at once. You can't fight two people at one time. Not in real life. It's very hard. You can't fight three people. So you have to tell an adult. You have to tell somebody whose responsibility is to get rid of bullying. You have to tell them. And besides that, you work on yourself. Those toxic thoughts that I was talking about earlier, you got to cut them away. And, I have limitations even on me. As a kid growing up, I had limitations on me. I have a lazy eye. So, this is something I joke about, and my own kids will laugh at it if I make a lazy eye joke. But it's like, most of the time my eyes working together, that's great. But later in the day, like if I get tired, my left eye will go out. And
Okay.
so far, nobody has said anything about it on TikTok and said, hey, he's got a lazy eye, So now that I admit it,
I don't really see it. I don't see it.
yeah, yeah. And so somebody on TikTok may say it. However, when I was a kid, it was a little more pronounced. Or, at the end of the day, if I get tired, kids would say, what are you looking at? That kind of thing, So it's it made me self-conscious. So, and people will tell me, and even my own kids, like my own daughter, she's grown now. But I remember the first time that I made a lazy eye joke with her, like about myself. I joked about myself and she died laughing, and she was probably about 10 or 12 years old. She had never heard me talk about it. So that shows that I was sensitive about it. So I made a joke about myself having a lazy eye, and she almost died. She laid down on the couch and was laughing and giggling and bouncing because I made a joke about my lazy eye. So, it's you got to learn to love your imperfections. These are the only two eyes I'm going to get. I believe in God. God doesn't make mistakes. And someday I'm going to get to go to heaven, and I'm going to get two new eyes that work perfectly. And my eyes have never held me back from doing anything I want to do. I'm a police officer. My eyes work great working together. However, one is lazy and one will go out sometimes, and it'll make you look cross-eyed or cockeyed, wall-eyed, whatever word you want to use. And somebody could say, oh man, you're late. You got a lazy eye, and yeah, that would hurt me to hear that. You know what I mean? Because it's an imperfection about myself that I don't particularly like, but I really can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? So I'm 40 years old. I said, if I live to 80, I'm halfway through my life. It's like, hey, these eyes are all I've got. I got to take care of them. This brain is all I've got. I got to take care of this brain and tell myself positive things. If I'm having a bad day, I got to get out of that funk one way or another, because you got to start the next day brand new.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really like everything you just said, and I was the way Zoom works and the way it'll appear on YouTube is, I believe it focuses on whoever's making the sound, so it'll be mostly focused on you, and the viewers can't see, but I'm nodding along in agreement. Full
Okay.
support from me. We have the time for maybe one or two more questions. So if anyone has any other questions, please send them. And if we don't get to them, I will message him, and hopefully we can answer them and message them to you either on TikTok or Instagram or something like that. This guy has been waiting for a while, so I'm going to mention his thing.
Yeah.
It says, how do you stay motivated to work out? I started about 4 months ago, and I noticed my drive to work out has gone down. I've been taking more and more rest days, especially now that I'm stuck at home.
That's a great question. And honestly, I look at it as more discipline than motivation. So even though I'm a motivational speaker, I want to inspire people. Sometimes the rah motivation, it works for a little bit, but then it'll wane. It won't really work for long. You know what I mean? But I had a love for becoming strong. I wanted to be physically strong. And that means that I would work out on the days that I didn't want to work out. And I know some people don't even like to hear that. It's like that bad word that I mentioned earlier that I don't even like, caloric deficit. I don't like that word. And I don't like the word. I really do like the word discipline. Okay. So if you're disciplined, you're going to work out no matter what. Now, I still, I'm not saying you have to work out every single day. And usually, if you read the book Dinosaur Training, he suggests that you only train 3 or 4 days a week. Now, that's only 3 or 4 hours a week. And if somebody tells me they don't have the time to work out 3 or 4 hours a week, they're lying. You know what I mean? They're lying to themselves and they're lying to me. So if you do the big basic exercises like bench, squat, deadlift, chin up, dips, barbell rows, dumbbell rows, farmer's walk, things of that nature, really hard stuff, high rep deadlifts, high rep squats, things that are compound movements that work a lot of muscle mass at the same time. You do dips and it works your chest and your triceps and your shoulders and your abs. The chin-ups work your abs. A lot of people don't think it really works your abs. They've done the EMG studies, the electronical studies, and the chin-ups activate your abs to a major degree. So, it's also building your biceps. So if you do chin-ups about 6 inches apart, a 6-inch apart chin-up, it kills your bicep, it kills your back, and it kills your abs in a good way. So I shouldn't say kills, stimulates. So it stimulates your biceps, and your back and your abs all together. Your body works as a unit, and I know Hampton loves that with calisthenics. So do the compound movements, do those compound movements. But to get back to the point of the question, you don't have to have motivation. You have to have discipline. You just have to train 3 or 4 days a week. Try to break your own personal records. You won't always be able to do it, but try to break your records. And I like low reps too. So sometimes I do 3 reps. So I'll do like 6 to 10 sets of 3 for bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press. I do the log press. I have a log press at home. Like, the strongmen have a log press. So do like 6 to 10 sets of 3. Try to break your record on some of that. You don't always have to. Try to break your record for 5 reps. Try to know what you can do for 8 reps, and try to know what you try to break your record for 10 reps. And then if you want to get really crazy for squats, do 20 reps and try to break your record for 20 reps. It becomes cardio, but it will build muscle throughout your whole body. So people would say, wow, you have big shoulders. How'd you get these big shoulders? Well, I had a big squat bar on my back, and I would do 20 reps. And it's like, it's not a shoulder exercise, but because I'm having to flex and hold the bar, it becomes a shoulder exercise. So you do all the compound movements that stimulate your entire body together: deadlifts, farmer's walk, and squats. So if somebody's really wanting to get strong, full squats, deadlifts, and farmer's walk. And then you can throw in bench press and overhead press into that. But to stimulate the whole body and really get your testosterone going is squats, deadlifts, and farmer's walks. Those 3 things. But you do not have to have motivation to train. You just have to have discipline to train. You don't have to be motivated. If I feel bad, here's the funny thing, okay? I know I'm going off on all these tangents. I have had some of my best workouts when I don't feel good. I'll go in. I used to train with a group of powerlifters, and some days I'd feel like, man, I feel sick. And I would end up breaking a personal record when I felt sick because I was motivated by somebody in the group or to beat them, even though that's a funny motivation. Mm-hmm. But I train by myself a lot now, and I could have a bad day, but I know that if I just get out there and I just do 5 sets of something, I'm in the midst of the workout now, so you can't say no. So just say, hey, I'm going to go do 5 sets of overhead press. I don't care what happens. I'm just going to do 5 sets of overhead press. Well, by the time you do that, you'll be ready to do something else. So just train 3 or 4 times a week. And, if you don't feel like pushing it, don't push it. Just don't try to break your own record every time. You don't have to break records every time you train. However, have that discipline and have that love for yourself that I was talking about earlier. Love yourself enough to have the discipline to train and to exercise. So.
Absolutely. I like that. We're nearing the end. Is there anything you want to add?
Honestly, I just really appreciate the opportunity. I want to reemphasize that I really love Hampton's positive energy, and I love your content. I love your TikToks. I love your Instagram. I really love your positivity. Life is short. I talked about me being 40 and probably being halfway through my life. I want to hang out with positive people. I want to be inspired by positive people. And when I have somebody, my whole TikTok feed is positivity. So if somebody's being negative on TikTok, guess what? I'm not going to follow them. And if somebody has a mean comment, okay, bullying is big on TikTok. So let me talk about this for a split second.
Go ahead.
Should have mentioned this earlier. If somebody says something bullying against me on TikTok or trying to bully one of my followers, all I'm going to do is delete the comment and block you immediately. It's like, if somebody does some bullying, I do that. Here's what I do. I delete and I block. And it's like water off a duck's back. It feels great. So, be inspired by me on that, please. If somebody's bullying you, delete their comment immediately. Some of the bullying comments that come on my page, they don't even last 20 seconds. If I'm scrolling TikTok, their comment doesn't get to live. It doesn't even get to live for 20 seconds. I'll delete the comment and then I'll immediately block the person. It'll happen so fast, they'll wonder what the heck was going on. So block them. delete them. That's what I say. Just delete the comment and block them, because they're not trying to engage with you for any other reason than to bully you. They're trying to engage to be negative, to hurt your feelings. And the fact that they are being a bully and they're trying to hurt your feelings, it shows a lack of something that is going on in their head. So no, you shouldn't waste a moment of your life negotiating with somebody like that, or even entertaining them, or even giving them the dignity to answer the question. I won't even answer the question. I just deleted them. Like I said, 20 seconds if they're lucky, delete,
Awesome. So perhaps someone a real life application to that and summarized would be, when you can walk away, do.
Yeah. Yes. Walk away. Walk away.
Yeah,
every time. And if somebody's trying to fight you in real life, okay, it's like, I consider myself a tough guy, and I'm a police officer. So it's different with me, because I actually get to arrest the bullies. So that's fun. But if I wasn't a police officer, my advice is walk away when you can. Don't engage with somebody with mental illness. Usually, even if they're not mentally ill all the time, they're having some form of temporary mental illness that is causing them to try to do some kind of negative behavior with you. Walk away. Get out of there. Defend yourself. Defend yourself if you have to, but don't start the fight. Walk away. Don't engage them. And don't even think about what they say ever again. Try to block it out of your mind. They're just wasting your life.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up, and then I'll talk with you for a couple more minutes after we end the stream. But thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Hampton.
So, yeah, it's lagging a bit, but we'll sit around. I stopped the recording, I believe, and I'm going to stop the stream shortly afterwards. I'm really glad that you were apologizing for the tangents, but it actually helped, because I did a live earlier today. I did a live earlier today, and my lives they're very intense on me, because I'm not doing one where I'm exercising or something. I'm there to answer questions and engage with people. And I get so many. I don't have that big of a following, but I get so many questions that I had to talk the entire time. So I talked for about 50, 60 minutes straight with hardly a breath. And I was like, well, I'm going to be hoarse after the podcast today. So that worked out really well, actually.
Good. And the thing about me is, even though I'm more of an introverted person, which doesn't sound natural because I'm a police officer, and you can't really be introverted and be a police officer because you have to solve other people's problems. But I believe that being a police officer for 20 years has taken me from being an introverted child into being kind of extroverted when I have to be. And then beyond that, I like to get up in front of a crowd and do the number one thing that people fear, which is public speaking. It's the number one fear in the world, even above death. So it's like, I like public speaking and doing strongman feats, and I like being a police officer and solving problems. However, you could ask my girlfriend and my kids, when I'm at home, I'm quiet, and I love to watch movies. I love to listen to podcasts, and I'm really more introverted. I'm an introverted person, even though my occupations are both extroverted, public speaking and being a police officer. So it's kind of strange. And sometimes we could have a day where you ask me questions and I would just give you a couple sentences, but for whatever reason today, I was able to flow and to talk a lot. I don't know if I said
No, you didn't. And
I tried not to, because it's like, you think if something's going to be recorded, you're like, man, I don't want to say and we all do it. It's no matter how long you speak, and how much experience you have, you're always going to have the days where you say and I even lost my train of thought on one point. But overall, no, it was great. And I got to say everything I wanted to say, because I got to talk about Dennis Rogers. I got to talk about Sean Stevenson. I mean, so it's been great.
Okay. Good deal. Actually, before we end the stream, the recording's ended. Where can people find you on social media?
Yes, Strongman Storytelling on Instagram and Strongman Storytelling on TikTok.